Can
Sure.
you tell me the difference between voting by mail in Florida and, say, voting by mail in Pennsylvania? What's the difference?
Absentee, no excuse, what I call no excuse absentee. Say, listen, I'm concerned because of the pandemic. Will you send me an absentee ballot that comes directly to me? I certify that. I have a signature requirement that makes sure that it's me that's actually voting, and I send it back. I don't have a problem with that. The president doesn't have a problem with that. What we do have a problem with, and what I have a problem with, because I don't want my vote or anyone else's to be disenfranchised, do you realize how inaccurate the voter rolls are with just people just moving around, not let alone the people that die off, but sending ballots out just based on a voter roll registration? Anytime you move, you'll change your driver's license, but you don't call up and say, hey,
no
by the way,
of widespread voter fraud, though. But there's no evidence of widespread voter fraud.
There's no evidence that there's not either. That's the definition of fraud, Jake.
Mark Meadows, best known for being Trump's chief of staff who pushed unsubstantiated claims of voter fraud, is now being investigated for, voter fraud. I'm Yasmin Khan with Rebel HQ, and man, people really love to project. I remember one time there was a guy who is the most materialistic person I know who called me materialistic, and I thought, I'm a lot of things, but materialistic is not one of them. Thought it was interesting on his part, but people talk about what they know. And Mark Meadows is no exception to this. In a previous video, I mentioned that Trump's campaign against free and fair elections began way before the 2020 presidential election, when he kept going on about rampant voter fraud across the nation. Of course, he didn't have any evidence to back up his claims, but he didn't need it because his supporters didn't ask for it. And by the way, this came from the guy who actually won the 2020 election. So if there was actually voter fraud from 2016, his own presidential win would have been called into question. Still, he kept talking about it, essentially priming his base to be angry when he was ultimately denied a second term by American voters. Suddenly, he was a prophet. It was set up as an impossibility that he could actually lose the election, so anything short of a landslide victory was considered suspect by his base. It was a big, dumb, premeditated, I told you so moment by Trump. However, there was a more dire consequence of the voter fraud allegations. Following election night, it took a few days for all of the mail-in ballots to be counted, with Biden getting his 270 electors by November 7th. That same day, as I'm sure you'll remember because who can forget, as the mail-in ballots continued to trickle in, Rudy Giuliani infamously gave a press conference in the parking lot of a Not Four Seasons in Pennsylvania, calling into question the state's vote counting process. 1 year later, our government spent $519 million of taxpayer money investigating claims of voter fraud that they knew were unsubstantiated. Meanwhile, Trump's own PAC donated $0 to investigate an election that was allegedly stolen from him. Think about the opportunity cost, how much we could have done with all that time and money that we'll never get back. And here are the findings. Trump and his cronies claim that there was some massive, widespread conspiracy against him, with the Democrats colluding with the coronavirus and Dominion voting systems to rig the election against him. I think that was actually a plotline on Scandal, but either way, only 475 instances of voter fraud were found in 6 battleground states: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. According to The Hill, Biden won those 6 states by 311,257 votes, which is substantially more than 475. Dominion Voting Systems has since sued Newsmax and OAN for $1.6 billion for defamation. And there have been countless instances of attempted election tampering from both Republican officials and voters. Despite the huge waste of time and money, and despite the fact that there has been no evidence found of widespread, massive voter fraud, many states have used this whole conspiracy to alter their own election processes for the worse, citing a necessary crackdown on election security. They've used it as justification for making voting more difficult for traditionally Democratic voters. The Texas Attorney General, Ken Paxton, even sank $2.2 million into investigating voter fraud in Texas, despite the fact that Texas was never a swing state and despite the fact that Trump actually won Texas. He closed 3 cases in 2021. It was all a farce just to get to this point. So let's get back to Mark Meadows. The New Yorker recently reported that Mark Meadows registered to vote just a few weeks prior to the 2020 presidential election using the address of a mobile home in Macon County, North Carolina, a place where he has never lived or even visited. It gets better though. After Trump's war on mail-in voting, Meadows voted absentee by mail. Also, since the allegations have become known, the Macon County District Attorney, who was endorsed by Meadows, has recused herself from the investigation. So, people talk about what they know. They project what they know. They knew that voter fraud through the mailing system was possible because they were the ones doing it. Now, Mark Meadows, who once refuted the fact that there was no evidence of voter fraud with, well, there's no evidence that there's not voter fraud, is the most recent face of Republican deceit. Deceit that has intentionally destabilized American democracy in an effort to seat an unelected and twice impeached president.